down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Savvy Radio Show, and I'm down with my man Pat Pointon is back. This episode is going to be a unique episode because I'm just going to outlay what I have been dealing with, which, let's say, struggles, and what I've been going through. And you know, if you don't know, Pat Pointon's been doing real estate since he was almost born. He's got 60 plus years of knowledge and skill. He is, I would say, the godfather of real estate investing. He's been a coach, mentor of mentors and coaches of people that coach and mentor me. He is passionate about raising private money over $6 million. I know I keep saying all this over and over again, but a lot of people just randomly tune in one time, and I think they need to know the caliber of person that's on the other microphone here. But okay, so Pat, I've been struggling with, I coach people, and I coached this guy when I met him, and this is going to take a little long intro, but when I met him, he only had 9 houses. He was bellyache, and he couldn't buy any more houses because he maxed out the FHA loans. And so I was like, you're dumb. You do commercial money or creative. So he eventually did that and bought an apartment building. And he is killing it in the apartment building. And I have had this week. I own an apartment building. And in my career, I bought another apartment building and it didn't do well. And I failed miserably with this second apartment building. Now, on the outside, it looked good. I actually profited on this apartment building, the second one that I purchased, but it didn't go well. And I realized, so then people would ask me all the time, and this is the kind of scenario, you know, are you going to get into more apartments? You know, single family leads into apartments. And that's what you should do as a real estate investor. That's the first question problem. This is what people say. You should graduate from single family to that. So with the epiphany that I've been coaching this guy, and he is killing it in apartments. I mean, this guy is doing so well, and I'm just so proud of him. And then I looked at my own self, and I'm like, I'm anti-apartments. I think that they're a headache. You're trapped in them. You can't really sell them. You're selling them to people like you, Pat, gangster negotiators. And this one thing hit me with a ton of bricks. And I don't know that I was uneducated. That the reason why I failed is I didn't know what I was doing.
Well, that's probably true in anything you do that you haven't done before.
Well, I owned a first apartment building and I did well. But when I go back and analyze the history, I bought it extremely well as a luck, random. It was, but now that when I bought that apartment building was 140 and I rehabbed it, put about 60, 70 in it. Now that apartment building is worth 500 or more, actually between 500 and 800, depending on who you talk to. Because I just got lucky. It was just random.
Well, first off, I'm probably not the best guy there is to talk about apartments.
We're not going to talk about apartments.
Because I have never owned an apartment complex.
No, I think the point is, though, but you are a master at land development. You build, okay? Mm-hmm. You own a storage unit. The question on the table is, a lot of people just assume that they need to be progressing into a different arena. They master single-family homes. They want to get in apartments, or they want real money. Or what is real money? And so I think what my question is, when do you know when to jump into land development? When do you know when to jump into single family owner financed? When to get out of banks, or when to start using, when I started in real estate, man, I was anti-banks because I was uneducated. That was one problem. 2, I didn't think I'd qualify. I didn't have a job, and they denied me several times. So I said, F you banks. And then I had no other options. So I went into creative financing, owner finance. And it's funny now that I don't use creative finance, but I really want to go back into creative finance. So the point is like a lot of people struggle, how to get in the game. And then when they're in the game, what's the natural progression?
Well, that's probably an almost impossible question to answer completely because everybody's different. So the answer that I give you, if it were a perfect answer, might not be any good for somebody else because of their different skill sets, their different financial requirements, whatever. I can mostly share my experience with you, and I have never owned an apartment complex. Right. I've come close a time or two, but I've just never done it. And one reason I haven't is I'm not very good at managing rental property, and I know that up front. Mm-hmm. To tell you the truth, I don't like managing rental property. I like what rental property does for you financially. Yeah, right. I just don't like the basics of it. Well, I think the more units you have, especially intensely together, and most of them exactly alike, i.e. an apartment complex, the better manager you better be. And I think you're generally going to rent to the lower economic groups or the young economic groups, which means lots of move in, lots of move out, lots of collections, lots of management intensive issues. I'm not real fond of those things. As people get more and more steady, they tend to want to leave the apartment and buy a home or rent a home. They want a place for their kid to play in the backyard and a dog and a better school and a place to park their car and a garage and all of these things that houses have that apartments generally do not have. And so that's the tenant that I'm looking for when I have to rent, as opposed to the apartment tenant, which is generally not the tenant that I'm looking for. They may become the tenant I'm looking for, but they're not generally one now.
So to give it a little bit more perspective, the apartment brings in more money quicker, but the single family is a safer, secure, longer term.
Easier to manage.
Right. And that's basically what but I set a goal for this next year, 2018, is to study, and I want to master. I mean, I want to grow my business. I want to get to 1,000 units. I know. It's funny.
It's pretty staggering.
I mean, it is a goal, and the reason why, it's not that I need the money, and I'm not saying that piously, like, oh, I'm rich. No, I just want to see the capacity that I can do. I want to be the very best in whatever I'm doing. If we're doing this radio show, I want the very best person on the show. I don't want to cut corners.
I assure you, if you get 1,000 units in Oklahoma City, you'll be the very best. I mean, that's tremendous. I mean, there's a worthwhile goal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that's a lot of work. It's going to be a tremendous financial opportunity.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily Oklahoma City. It could be, this gentleman owns this, and I'm following this guy, and I know him, I trust him, I know him intimately. In the success that I've seen, like he owns the apartment building 3 hours away. It throws off $5,000 a month, net. He raised $3 million relatively easily. He raised $1.2 million just with a pool locally. He had a FCC attorney, and then he raised $2.6 million through non-recourse loan from Fannie Mac, whatever the frick it is. And I mean, it sounds glamorous, and it wasn't easy. The first year it was murder for him, and now he has a property manager in place, and he lightly manages that person, and it runs like the machine. And I mean, why not have 10 of those? That's 1,000 units.
Well, nothing wrong with it, I suppose. It's just not the way I would have done it. Okay, and that's I can only express what I could have done. Now, I probably what's kept me from doing that? For one thing, it's hard to raise those kinds of funds. For one. Number two, I know it's a very intense management situation, which I know is something I'm not very good at, nor do I like very well. Mm-hmm. Number three, if I go to get rid of it,
you're going to take it back.
It's going to be difficult to get rid of, right? Because there's only a limited number of people that can buy it, and among them, how many of them want to buy it that could buy it? You got two things. You got the people that could buy it. That's a fairly small pool. And then you got an even smaller pool of people that would buy it. And so the idea is that it's probably going to take a pretty substantial haircut to get somebody to buy it. I don't like that very well.
Yeah, and I was caught in that. That's why I had a bad taste in my mouth with apartments. And, honestly, I don't know where this is going to go. But I do know, and this is why this is a unique podcast, is that I think that education is the most important thing. I think that I set a goal that I want to know the language. I want to know everything about apartments. I want you to call me up and say, Stephen, I have this NOI, ROI, what cap rate, all this other stuff that I barely understand, and I can make a sound decision and know that that apartment building is a deal.
Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with that, and if you're going to buy apartments, you better know those things.
Right, and that's where I failed before.
Now, what I would say is I've always stuck to single-family homes, and one of the reasons I have is for whatever reason, I need to get rid of some of them. Tired of them, medical, whatever.
Leverage.
I sell them to homeowners, not to investors who are going to cut my throat.
Mm.
And maybe I only sell a few. Now, here, let's say you got a 100-unit apartment complex, and let's say that you needed some surgery and it was going to cost $200,000.
Okay.
Well, you might sell 4 $50,000 houses in Edmond that you had and pay it off and keep the other 150.
Mm.
Where if you have 150 of them in an apartment complex, you got to sell the whole damn thing. You can't sell any of it.
Right.
Well, that's not to my liking as a rule.
Right.
I like the flexibility of individually disposable properties because you make a mistake, and you were just talking about a mistake. You make a mistake, you're in for the whole mistake.
Right.
Where if I make a mistake on a house, I just get rid of that house, and the loss is negligible, if any, and I go on down the road with the other houses. Now, that's my feeling and my comfort zone.
Now, okay, let's go back to the kind of the original question was progression in real estate. You know, you can pretty master single-family homes pretty quickly. You know, the 100-house rule, you understand banking, you understand some more funding. It's pretty simple math. You got this on lockdown. Did you start out with single-family and moved into development? And then now you have a storage unit. Have you ever owned a mobile home park?
Yes.
So you've dabbled in land, single-family, storage unit, mobile home park. How did that progression work for you?
Well, my dad was a real estate developer. Land was something he did all along.
And you just watched that on the side.
So I already knew how to do that because my dad was doing it. But the easiest place to start for most people, and me included, is single-family homes. If you're not careful, you'll branch out in these other things because you're bored and you're looking for a new challenge. That's not necessarily the best reason to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're really successful at doing something, why not just continue to do it over and over and over and over? Because it's very predictable. Now, on the other hand, let's talk about those other items. I have a philosophy that if you want to try something, I'm talking about, let's take a mobile home park.
Mm-hmm.
You can observe how they're run and whatever, but it ain't the same as owning one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you found that out with the apartment you didn't like. You looked at it on paper, everything looked great.
Right.
You got it.
Optimistic.
It wasn't as great as you first thought it was, and you didn't see any of that on paper.
Well, and I think the challenge was I did it.
You just went and did it, and then you see these things you didn't like about it. Right. Well, here's what I'm trying to say. I know that's a fact in everything that you can do. Any of these things can be a problem or not a problem. And you won't know you get in there and how well you adapt to the issues. So I tend to buy a small one and see how I like it and what the real problems are.
Mm.
Now when I go to look at a big one, I know a lot more about it than I knew just from looking at it on paper.
Right. I mean, back to the mobile home thing. I mean, some people love them. They just seem like a giant headache to me.
Well, they are a giant headache, about like an apartment complex.
Right.
Now, what I think of as a mobile home park, if you're looking at a mobile home park, in my opinion, you're not renting the spaces. You're putting mobile homes on there that you own, and it's an apartment complex with removable, replaceable apartments. That's exactly what you want.
And I think the ideal situation would be to finance them all. Tenant buyers.
That would be better, but even then, only about 20% of them are actually going to close.
Sure.
But that would be fine. The thing I'm getting at, yes, I think that's probably the best way to do it. The thing I'm getting at here is a mobile home park makes huge money. It has a lot of management headaches. Now, apartments make big money. They have a lot of management headaches. Mm. The difference is you can't replace the apartments very easily. With a mobile home park, you can buy used mobile homes at an incredible price.
And when you say replace, I mean, you could update an apartment building, put granite in it.
You can remodel it and whatever, yes. But you can't change it. If it's got a bunch of one-bedrooms or whatever, it's rather difficult to make a bunch of two-bedrooms.
True.
Well, let me give you an example. I went to this mobile home park. I got rid of some of the mobile homes and put in others, better ones, bigger ones. You can't do that with an apartment complex very easy. I put in some 16 by 80s that were 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I could not have done that very easily to a apartment complex. I'm pretty much stuck with whatever I've got as far as the configuration.
So flexibility is a big point in your investing.
Well, it can be because everything seems to change. And so flexibility gives you a lot of options. Now, the next one there is I can rent it or I can sell it. I take the apartment complex. It's a rental deal. Unless I want to go through the trouble of making it into a condo and selling it that way, which is pretty complicated and works on the East Coast and places, but doesn't work here.
Right. So do you still have a mobile home park?
No, I sold it.
What was that process? Was it a good taste in your mouth? Was it a bad thing?
Oh, we made money on it, good money on it. Now, we would have probably made more money by keeping it. But there were some reasons why I didn't want to keep it. It kind of takes a lot of your time and bogs you down. It makes good money, but it was somewhat management intensive.
Which you managed, you self-managed it?
Myself and my son managed it, yes.
Okay.
He liked it better than I did, to be honest with you. And he was a little bit less enthused with the idea of selling it. But we sold it to another investor. We made good money on it. And we're receiving money today on it. We're carrying the note. I mean, that's what we do is we sell stuff and carry the note. It was just like selling the house and carrying the note.
Yeah.
And
just a bigger thing.
Just a bigger thing. And so it's been fine for me, and it's been a very good investment. I did the same thing when I bought a mini storage. I bought a 100-unit mini storage, not a 500-unit one.
Mm-hmm. Just test it out.
But room to expand.
Okay.
If I like it, it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. If I don't like it, I'll sell it to somebody else. If you make a mistake, it's nice to be able to accept your mistake and go on without it bringing the death of you. Now, you buy something like a 50-unit office building and you were mistaken about how it runs, you're done, Jack. You're going down probably. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. If you bought a 4-story office building, kind of like what you have here,
right.
if it isn't successful, you can probably sell it, take your loss, and move on.
Right.
Now, after you've owned it 5 years, I guarantee you know a lot more about what you want in a 50-story one than you knew when you started.
Yeah, and I'm not a real big fan of it.
Well,
I'm telling you, back in December, I was all juicy on this building. Now, July, 7 months later, I'm like, man, I'm not big in commercial.
Well, just think if you'd have bought one 10 times this size.
Yeah, I was.
Your problem would have been 10 times bigger.
And I think that's a thing that we need to help people. This is an emotional game.
Oh.
You get giddy, you get excited, you see the profit potential.
The thrill of making the deal gets you sometimes by the throat.
Right. And I mean, I bought this right within reason, but after I got the appraisal and I got this, and then I got tenants moving in and out, and it's a different quality of tenant, and it's just a different dynamic. And then when people are in an office building, they tend to want service a lot faster. If the AC doesn't go get fixed within 13 minutes, we got a problem.
Well, now say a lot of these things that you did not know
right
before you bought one.
Yeah.
Now, aren't you glad you didn't buy a 20-story one that cost $8 million?
No, exactly. I love your philosophy.
Now, after you've run this one a year or two, you'll really recognize a good deal on a commercial building if one comes along. I mean, you really know this is a stone cold, I got to do it deal.
That's so funny because the guy that was kind of coaching me and mentoring me through this process, a friend of mine, because I always go to the guy that is an expert in that area and ask him for myself. And when I told him the numbers, he was always 50% of what I'm saying. Like, so if the thing was worth $400,000, you need to make an offer of $200,000. I'm like, that's impossible. Like, no one's. And see, when he was coaching me on this property, I paid more than he wanted me to pay for because I didn't know. Now I know I would probably do less. Now, it still was the deal. The guy that I bought this property from, I took over the loan basically. So there was no more room for negotiating. But now I know. When I see it a bona fide deal,
you'll know
it will probably be 50% on the 50%.
My dad used to refer to these as nursery real estate transactions, and what he meant by that is it taught you the basic beginning of how to do that kind of a transaction, whatever kind it was. He did a bunch of warehouses one time. He did it a small little 8-acre warehouse project. First time he ever did any of them. He didn't go build 160 acres someplace, and then 2/3 of it set vacant. Like you'll see commercial warehouse additions that have been vacant for 15 years because somebody screwed up and thought they could go big time and then couldn't, and then somebody comes in and buys them for a song. What my dad did was an 8-acre one, learned a whole lot he didn't know, and then didn't do anymore.
So what advice would you give? We got about 20 minutes in right here, Pat.
I'd start with single-family homes. I would decide what I like to do, which in my case is fix them up and sell them, or fix them up and sell or carry them, are the two things that I like to do. That's where I try to put the majority of my emphasis.
Okay, so now you mentioned that you don't like management. I understand. I think a lot of people don't, or they're scared. What advice would you give to someone? Hey, they need to be in real estate because this is a cash machine. It's a retirement. It's a great life. When someone says, I don't like management, what would you say to them?
Well, depending on what they're investing. Let's say you got a really fine job and you're not going to quit it.
Right. You're a doctor.
Okay. Then I would buy them and I would put them with a property manager. I would buy them in the very best neighborhoods where I thought we'd see some appreciation, or at least very stable real estate markets. And I would just park my money there and let time take care of me.
Right.
Now, I have a very good friend. I don't think she'd mind me using her name, Joanne Kim. And that's exactly what they do.
Sure.
Very adroit at doing that.
She's a great investor.
Yes. And one of my mentorship students, and I'm so proud of her.
Yeah, she's incredible. All right. So what other advice would you give? If someone's got the itch and they're thinking about getting into land, or they're thinking about getting mobile homes, or in my case, apartments, what other advice? And let's just say this is your son.
Well, now, in my case, if it were my son, I would feel better about him doing a mobile home park because he has experience at that than I would say apartments, which he does not.
So, but he came running to you
now,
today.
In your case, you have some apartment experience, no mobile home park experience.
No.
I would feel better about you getting into an apartment deal than a mobile home park.
Well, I can tell you right now, I don't want to do mobile homes. I
give them to me.
Yeah,
I'll tell you in a hurry whether you want one or not.
I just bought a deal from somebody, and they're selling their asset in Midwest City that I just closed on, and they are buying mobile homes in Detroit, mobile home park, 2 of them in Michigan. I mean, to me, it just sounds like a loaded gun, suicidal.
I wish them only the best. I don't know who it is. Don't tell me who it is. I don't need to know.
I don't know them either.
But my point to you would be this. I would not do that in a market I wasn't already familiar with.
True.
I don't care what it is.
Or anywhere.
I don't care where it is.
Here's a couple of things that, real estate, you're doing well in your market. And so let's just say you wanted to branch out to another state. Let's just say Texas. I have a lot of friends in Texas. People, they like me down there. The savvy landlord, I don't know why. And when I started studying their market, man, they pay 3 times in property taxes. Like Texas is not a landlord-friendly state. The laws seem to be pretty kosher with the laws here in Oklahoma, but you're going to pay up the wazoo because come to find out, they don't have income tax there. They have property tax. Well, and then I was studying in Indiana. They have a schedule of tax there. What do you mean? If you're an owner occupied, you pay 1%. If you're an absentee owner, you pay 2%. If you are commercial, you pay 3%. Each market is extremely different.
Let me answer it this way. If you ever played poker and they're playing a game that you've never played before, they bring up Deuces Wild or whatever, you're going to lose until you learn how to play it. Mm-hmm. I don't care what the game is. That's why I start with these nursery transactions so that I can learn to play the game before I lose big.
Awesome. Great advice. Well, hopefully you learned something today. This was the most unique podcast. I love Pat. He always pushing me. He's like, Pat, what's the subject we should cover? And he's like, what have you been struggling with? And I go, I've been struggling with what's the next level that I want to go to. And I didn't do well in apartments. And now I know for me, I'm just going to take a year off. 2018, I want to study. I've actually enrolled in some classes just to master apartments before I even buy them.
There you go.
All right. Well, that's it. Go to thesavvyradioshow.com. My name is Stephen VanCauwenbergh, the Savvy Landlord. We're here with my co-host, superstar Pat Pointon. Tune in and don't miss an opportunity or an episode to go out and buy assets.
Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at savvyradioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook and always be buying assets.